Hey everybody, Daryl and Holly with Exquisite Exotics here. Today we're going to continue on our genetics series, so this is going to be 102 in our learning series. I know if you haven't seen 101, please watch it first because we're building on that video. I'm not going to cover the stuff that I did in 101, so you really should be watching that first. I'll go ahead and put, this is in a playlist, so if you go ahead and go to our channel and go look for playlists, there's a genetics playlist for ball pythons. 101's in there, so go watch that first if you haven't. Next little bookkeeping thing. We had one of our close friends in the hobby send us an example of somebody proving out that pinstripe could actually be a codom gene and not a dominant gene, which is just a great example of how this hobby is constantly changing. You're learning stuff about something that everybody was sure about. Somebody else has proven that they don't think it's true. But to keep our video series consistent, I'm going to keep using pinstripe as our dominant example because for a while now everybody's thought that it is. If later down the road it's proven that it's not, just keep in mind that when I'm using pinstripe and talk about it being dominant, this applies to dominant genes. So pinstripe in our videos is going to be dominant just so we keep everything consistent and we don't need to redo our 101 video. And then as far as video layout, I know in the last video I said next video I'll talk recessives. I thought more about it, and I've changed the layout a little bit. In this video, we're going to talk about breeding dominant and codoms and do our small introduction into Punnett squares. The next video will be all recessives, and that's all we'll talk about. So that'll be our 103. And then our 104, we're going to get into some complicated Punnett squares. I don't know how it's looking at.
I'm just looking at you.
Oh, I thought she was looking down at our cat. We're going to get into complicated Punnett squares with like multi-genetic animals and how you figure out for yourself what your breedings are going to produce without having to rely on a website necessarily to try to do it. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's talk breeding with these DOMs and codom genes. Holly, put yourself in the camera from the edge. And then we're going to go ahead and make some Punnett squares. So hopefully you can see this. I think you can. We have dominant up here. So we talked about dominant genes. Basically, when you have a dominant gene, so our example we were using is pinstripe, 50% of the babies will come out with that gene. So if you have a pinstripe, and you breed it to, we're going to say a normal to make things simple in this video. We'll get into complicated Punnett squares in 104. Pinstripe to normal, 50% of your babies are going to be pinstripe. Moving down to codoms, if you have fire, which was our example in our first video, if you have a fire animal and you breed it to a normal, 50% of your babies are going to come out fire. Lastly, we talked about codominants have a super form, so you have what's called a super fire. If you breed a super fire to a normal, 100% of the babies are going to come out fire. What you have to keep in mind with a super form is a super form bred to a normal will never produce a super form. So a super fire bred to a normal will never produce a super fire. Anytime you have a super form, it's going to pass along one copy of that gene. So everything that a super fire produces will be fire, but it will never produce, by breeding it to a normal, a super fire. So let's see how that looks in some Punnett squares. So these are the important things we got to remember up here, okay? So our first one is going to be pinstripe. We're going to go ahead and show what a pinstripe looks like if you breed it to, let's say, another pinstripe. Actually, we're going to change it up just a little bit. We're going to see if we can fit hopefully 3 maybe across here.
Okay, we'll keep that size now.
Yep. We're going to do a pinstripe to a normal first.
Okay.
So we're going to put, if you're doing your Punnett squares, I start with an L. Put your animals you're breeding, one on the top, one on the side. So pinstripe up top.
Okay.
No, right out the whole word pinstripe. That's all right. We got enough space. In between there, right out
right
pinstripe.
Here, up here?
Yep. Holly's getting ahead of herself. And then over here, we're going to have our normal animal. Okay?
In there?
Yep.
Okay.
So the way I do Punnett squares to try to make it a little easier is at the top here, you make a box for every possibility of this animal bred to a normal. So in this case, we're going to talk about if you breed a pinstripe to a normal, what are the options? Okay? So, pinstripe to normal, knowing that pinstripe is dominant, 50% of the babies should be pinstripe. So we have two options. Either is a pinstripe, that's the P that Holly already put there, or we can make a line down through it, or it's going to come out normal. So if you bred a pinstripe to a normal, 50% of the babies will be pinstripe, 50% of the babies will be normal. Hence 50% of the babies for a codom. Okay, now over here we have a normal. If we breed a normal to a normal, you only get a normal. So there's an N for normal, and we make a line across. All right, so we can make a line down. In this example, we only have 2 boxes to fill in. You fill in the letters from the tops and the sides. Tops first, well, it doesn't matter, but I usually do top first. So that's going to be a P and an N, and that's going to be an N and an N. And what's that mean, P and N? Well, P means it's a pinstripe. It can't be a normal if it's a pinstripe, so it's a pinstripe, right?
Makes sense.
Yep, that works. N's are normals, so that comes out as a normal, right? So if you bred a pinstripe to a normal, you'd get 1 pinstripe and you'd get 1 normal, which is the exact same example as what we put up here. If we bred a pinstripe to a normal, 50% of the babies would come out pinstripe. And that's what we've proven. So we talked about how dominant genes, 50% of the babies are going to be that gene. So if we look at what we have here, we have 2 boxes. One of those boxes is a pinstripe. One of those boxes is a normal. So if you breed a pinstripe to a normal, 50% of the babies, so 1 out of 2 of the babies are pinstripe, and your other one is normal. So just proving out the 50% then. So let's get a little more complicated. Let's do pinstripe to pinstripe over here in the middle.
Okay.
Pinstripe up top, pinstripe. Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to save enough room for a 3rd box over here to the right.
Oh gosh. I
Holly
spelled
that.
wrong.
Yeah, she did.
Okay.
Wah, wah, wah. That's all right.
Pinstripe sideways.
Pinstripe down here. Ignore our misspelled pinstripe. And then make our little L.
Oh.
Right. Perfect. And then if we're going to follow that same thing. If we bred a pinstripe, pinstripe to a normal, what could we get? Well, the same thing, right? It's either going to be a pinstripe or normal, so we need our little P and N boxes.
Okay.
Okay, and then the same thing over here. If we bred a pinstripe to a normal, what options would we get? We would either get a pinstripe or we get a normal. And then fill in the rest of the boxes, lines and lines.
It's beautiful.
Okay, carry our letters down the same as we did over here. So the top left box is going to be a PP, PN, P or NP, doesn't matter, and NN. Okay, now we got our little boxes filled in just like you would with a Punnett square. What's this mean? Well, pinstripe doesn't have a super form, so you can't ever have double pinstripe. It is a pinstripe. Again, we're assuming pinstripe is a dominant gene. So this is a pinstripe because that's the only thing it can be, right? You can't have a pinstripe normal, so we'll take Holly's pen. We talked about pinstripes are dominant genes, so you can't have a double pinstripe, so it is a pinstripe. You can't have a pinstripe / normal, right? It is a pinstripe, so you get rid of normal. Same thing here, and then a normal is a normal. So what have we produced? We've produced a pinstripe, another pinstripe, and a normal. So 3/4, 3 out of 4. Of our animals are pinstripe when you breed a pinstripe to a pinstripe, and 1 out of every 4 animals you produce is going to be a normal. So that is doing a very simple Punnett square with a dominant gene. 2 dominant genes in a box together, of the same gene. You can ignore 1 copy because it doesn't change anything. If you have a dominant gene in the same box as you have a normal, you can always ignore the normal because the dominant gene is going to overwrite whatever the normal is. And then anytime you see just N's in a box for normals, that is a normal ball python. So normal, 3 pinstripes. That's what we got out of that pairing. So I think that's clearly shows what how the dominants work. Next, we're going to talk about codoms. So we'll have Holly make another box over here.
Okay.
We're going to start by doing the same thing. We're going to do fire to a normal. Make our little L. right, don't let Holly get ahead of herself this time. So move over a second just so we can see. So we're talking a codom gene. It works just like a dominant gene, right? 50% of the babies are going to be whatever that gene is. So if we breed a fire to a normal, half the babies are going to be fire, F, and half the babies are going to be normal. 50% of the babies carry the gene. Normal can only produce a normal, right? Line crossed. So we have FN and NN. And I'll move out of the way a second and we'll buy a pen from her. So we can see, sorry, codominance, it's working the same way as a dominant. 50% of the babies, we had here with this example, it comes out exactly the same, right? We'll get rid of that N because you can't have a normal if it's a codominant gene in there. So this is a fire, this is a normal. So we have a fire and a normal, so 50% of the babies that this produced when bred to a normal were fire. 1 out of 2, 50%. Okay? So it's working the same way the dominant genes did. 50% of the babies, when you breed it to a normal, come out with that. Now we're going to talk about the more complicated one, which is still not that complicated, but super forms, where 100% of the babies come out with fire. So we're going to readjust our screen here a little bit, and we'll be right back so that you guys can see a couple more Punnett squares. All right, continuing on with Punnett squares. So we're going to do, we did, you kind of can still see it a little bit up here. This was our fire to normal. We're going to talk about super forms. All right, so we're going to do a super fire to a normal next. So a little L, Holly, please. We're going to breed a super fire. Up top, right, super fire. She's always trying to get ahead of herself. And then a normal. Okay, I know you can't see it anymore, but up top we said if you have a super form, 100% of the babies will carry that gene. So because we have a super fire, 100% of the babies will be fire. So again, we're going to take this, breed it times a normal, and whatever options we have, that's what we put up top here. So if you breed a super fire to a normal, 100% of the babies will be fire. So we only have one option. All the babies of a super fire bred to a normal are fire. So we're going to put an F for fire. And then a normal only produces a normal. Makes a real easy Punnett square. Finish that Punnett square off, Holly. Make your lines, please, to make it clear. Thank you. Cool. Yep. So because a codom, of course, is going to overwrite normal. If you breed a super fire to a normal, you only have one option. All the babies are fire, right? And that's what we wrote up top. If you breed a super form, 100% of the babies are going to come out as fire. And we proved it out with a Punnett square. 100% of the babies are fire, and that's all you get. Okay, we're going to get a little more complicated. Next one, we're going to talk about a super fire to a fire. So Holly, if you can set up our next Punnett square, save room for a third one over here, just like we did before. All right, make our little L to start. A super fire bred to a normal. Our only option is fire. A fire bred to a normal. We have two options. We could either get a fire or we could get a normal. Okay, make our boxes. Fill in with letters. Okay, here's where things get different. Can you guys see that? Yeah, I guess you can. Sorry, I got my face right up there. I want to make sure you can see it. There's two F's and an F and an N. Here's where things get different from codoms to dominants. If you remember, in our pinstripe example, you can see it kind of up here. We had two pinstripe genes. And because it was a dominant, you can't have two copies of that gene, so we get rid of one of the copies. There is no super form of a dominant. But we do have a super form of fire. So if you get two fire genes, or two, in any case, any two codom of the same gene, that becomes a super form. So two Fs, double fire, is a super fire. Like Holly making it all fancy, right? So by breeding a super fire to a fire, we only have two options. We either are producing a super fire, or fire overwrites normal, get rid of that N, or a fire. Okay? So half the babies are going to be super fires, and the other half of the babies are going to be just straight fire. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, leave it down in the comments, and I'll try to clear things up in a later video. But super forms, 100% of the babies carry it, therefore only have one option if you breed it to a normal. The regular codom, you have two options. 50% of the babies are going to carry it, 50% are not. You fill out your letters, and when you have two of a codom gene that you see the exact same gene in the exact same square, that is a super form of that codom. So a super fire and a regular fire, that is our pairing and all the babies we can produce. And again, just to clarify, when I say percentages, that is on average, right? On average, half the babies will be super fire and half the babies will be fire. That doesn't mean every time you breed, it's going to be exactly that. It's just on average what you should produce. So just to clarify with these percentages I'm talking about. All right, we're going to do one more example just to show you so you understand it a little better. Hopefully it's been clear so far. We're going to do a super fire to a super fire. It's going to be the easiest Punnett square you've ever seen. All right, make our L. If you breed a super fire to a normal, you only have one option. You get a fire. If you breed a super fire to a normal, you have one option. You get a fire. Fill out our boxes.
I'm getting sloppy.
Super fire, bred to super fire, produces 100% super fires all the time. No option for anything else. Okay? So that's the way, you can still see this row. That's the way dominant genes work. If you're doing them in breeding and you're trying to do Punnett squares for them, this is the way, this is the way, codom genes work, whether it's just a straight codom or the super version of the codom. This kind of explains how all that stuff works. The only other thing I want to mention while we're here is allelic genes. You're going to hear the word allelic. And I'm going to use a mystic potion as an example, which is a Mojave mystic ball python. Okay? Allelic genes work like super forms. So if somebody tells you that two genes are allelic, that means, we're not going to get into, I'm trying to keep this simple, but just keep in mind that means it works like a super form. So if you have a mystic potion, which would be a mystic Mojave, you would fill out your Punnett squares very similar to how you do a super fire. So we're going to see if we can squeeze in one more Punnett square here. I'm going to see if I can adjust the camera just to make a little more space. All right, we're going to do it right here in the middle.
Sure.
So we're going to do a mystic potion, which is a mystic Mojave. Just right underneath of it. We're okay. Right, we're mystic Mojave.
Oh my goodness. Can you
To a normal. Mystic, wait till Holly has a chance to get there. Mystic and Mojave are allelic, so this is going to work like a super form in the fact that, with a super fire, you're never going to produce an animal, if you breed it to a normal, that is a super fire. It's going to pass along fire every single time. With a mystic potion, it's going to pass along either mystic or Mojave. Again, because this is an allelic combo. But it's going to pass on one or the other every time. It acts like a super form in the fact that it's passing on one or the other every single time. You will never get a normal baby if you breed a mystic potion to a normal. But you also, just like a super form, will never reproduce that baby either. So to show that in a Punnett square, how if you make our little L. Okay, hold on. I want to talk through it.
Sure.
So mystic potion bred to a normal. It is either going to pass on mystic or Mojave, one or the other. So we're going to write MY for mystic and MO for Mojave. It's like a super form. It's not producing any normals bred to a normal, right? Just like our super fire would never just produce a, if we go back up to this example, right? Super fire bred to a normal never produces anything normal. Same here. Does never produce anything normal. It will only produce either a mystic or a Mojave. And the normal, of course, is only a normal. So we can write the N in here. Fill in our squares. That's going to be M, Y, and then N. That's going to be M, O, N. So Codoms overwrite normals, exiled are 2 normals. A Mystic Potion bred to a normal, because it's allelic and acts like a super form, will only produce Mystic Potion or Mystics and Mojaves. It will never reproduce itself. So if you hear somebody say that 2 genes are allelic, just keep in mind that means it's going to work like a super form when you're doing your Punnett squares. If you have questions on that, please reach out to me, but hopefully that makes it clear what allelic means when you hear that term. All right, let's get this out of the way and we'll wrap up this video. All right, so that covers the 102 of the video. We've now covered dominant genes, codominant genes, and how you do the Punnett squares on them. And I briefly covered allelic genes. So as a reminder, allelic works like a superform. So if you understand how that superfire works, you have to treat allelic genes the same way if you're doing a Punnett square. So hopefully that was a clear, very simplified versions of Punnett squares. I showed you my way to do Punnett squares, which is you take the animal that's up top and you put all the combinations of, if you bred that animal to a normal, what it could produce. And you put that at the top, and then the same thing on the left-hand side, and then you just carry your letters over. Hopefully that was clear. If you have questions, please leave them down in the comments. I don't have anything else for this video. Holly? No? All right. Like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. We appreciate all you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Hopefully this was helpful. Bye.